lords and ladies of the realm. It is I, EmmightySofia, and I am actually here to break down not the HBO Game of Thrones series, but the latest episode of Telltale Games Game of Thrones. We are on episode 4? See, I don't have the information right in front of me, so I'm gonna sit here and be a little bit ignorant, but we're going to be talking the latest episode of the game. No gameplay footage here, although if my brother and I replay it, I would love to be able to maybe upload some footage. I don't know if we'll have time, but anyways, we're going to be talking about that episode. There will be lots of spoilers, so please do be alerted to that as we dive into this episode. And you can actually find a link in the description to my reviews of a couple of the other episodes from the Telltale Games Game of Thrones series. So, without further ado, let's dive into it. I am going to be referring to notes from my handy-dandy iPhone. And yeah, because there's a lot that happens in these episodes. I mean, if you guys have played at least the first episode of Telltale's Tales from the Borderlands, you'll know that these episodes can get quite lengthy and are very much action-packed. And what we get to see this time around, of course, is the activity that is brewing around Ironrath, and you are continuing to try to operate all the different pawns of the family in order to find support for Ironrath to defend House Forrester. That is the end goal, and we make a bit of progress towards that in this episode, or at least it depends on the decisions that you made. So, yeah, I am going to break down for you guys what my brother and I did and discuss those consequences. I would love to hear your thoughts about how your gameplay went. Because, as always, I'm very curious to see how certain things play out and how the choices that you make at the two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I chose the one less traveled by, question mark? Of course, you figure that out at the end of the episode, and we made a lot of unpopular decisions, I guess. And the way that my brother and I have been approaching this game in general is just by being way overly trusting of everyone, just kind of for the hell of it. And it's not because we personally think that is going to be the golden way, but it's like, we're kind of taking cracks at like this temporary happiness, which we don't know where everything is going to go. So while for the most part we try to be pragmatic about things, we are very much the trusting types, I guess you might say. So we start the episode off with Garrett, and if you guys will recall, Garrett ended up killing Britt at the end of the last episode. Britt pretty much started it, although it kind of depends on the way that you engage him. Regardless, you get caught, and the Night's Watch is going to have your head for this action, essentially. Not a lot of ways out and around that. But interestingly enough, when Frostfinger really brings the hammer down on Garrett, not, the figurative hammer before the literal axe, Finn actually goes so far as to stand up for Garrett, and while Finn and Garrett were not on good terms at Garrett's initial arrival at Castle Black, at least we had the two characters strike up a little bit of friendship, so we were kind of able to work that, and Finn was actually like, yeah, I can vouch for the fact that, like, it went down like this, and blah, 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 and he tried to kind of support you and defend you. And Frostfinger sees that as inherently suspicious for whatever reason. We tried to play it up as like, Garrett says, oh, he doesn't even like me. Why would we be planning anything anyway? We don't get along. But it doesn't matter. Garrett ends up in the clink. Things are looking a bit grim for him as far as traveling to the Grove, I think is what it's called. This magical, mystical place where he can possibly acquire help for the Forrester family. But, yeah, we go back to Asher Forrester, who is coming before Khaleesi herself. Now, this is before she and is it the second sons? I know the souls, I think it's the Second Sons. Sellsword, Second Sons. If I'm wrong, don't eat me alive, because I'd be very upset. But anyways, so they are getting ready to take Marine and to free the enslaved peoples and thus begin the first major reign of Daenerys Targaryen. And so Asher, of course, is accompanied by his uncle and Beshka, and it is ultimately decided that Asher is going to go help the Second Sons liberate Marine in exchange for a possible small army that Asher can take with him to go defend his house. And, I mean, Dany, she was pretty freaking sassy in this episode. I felt a little bit injured by some of the barbs that she threw my way being the way of Asher and Beshka. Of course, Beshka is the queen of muttering under her breath, more over her breath, with kind of like the pretend intention of not being heard, but it's like, whoa there. I mean, I'm very much invested in Beshka and Asher's friendship, but she's certainly putting things in hot water. So what we ended up doing, of course, was presenting to Dany the evidence that we did, in fact, encounter the dragon, showing the tooth, and then she kind of relents, and she's like, okay, what do you actually want? And, I mean, she is incredibly skeptical of Asher, and rightfully so. You know, she talks about those who come to her seeking power, seeking acclaim, you know, everything comes at a price, and she is incredibly aware of that, and aware of the fact that she very much needs the men whom she has hired in order to do something that is essentially fulfilling the higher calling of liberating humankind. You know, that's what she's all about. And so she sees you trying to defend your house, and we downplayed the like, oh, I'm trying to save my family thing, and more tried to just appeal to her as a ruler, and to be kind of like, you know, we want the same thing, etc., etc. And actually, some of her responses didn't quite seem to line up with the way that we tried to play Asher, so that was a little bit wonky. I'm not really sure why. I think Dany was just sassing up, and I can't blame her. She's got a lot of responsibility on her head, and and we also had Asher reach out to touch the dragon, and it almost didn't go so well. It didn't go swimmingly, but he still has his hand, so that's a positive thing in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, it's decided Asher and Beshka. You know, Beshka has a very intimate knowledge of the city. We don't find out until later in the episode why it is that she is so adamant about not going there, but it makes for a really incredible story. And in fact, I think that the plot line with Beshka was one of my favorite parts of this episode, simply because it takes this newer, not necessarily canonical character as far as the overarching universe of A Song of Ice and Fire and the Game of Thrones show, but this character that has been introduced in the context of the game. They really did a great job of kind of tying her into the bigger struggles that are happening in the books and show, even though she doesn't like have a place in those parts of the universe, if that makes sense. So I'm just really pleased with the way that we are being made to care about these characters, because it makes the stakes seem that much higher, and that is what is important about these episodic and decision narrative-based games, is we have to be invested in the people that we're working with. Because it's like, if we don't give a crap and we are just going from cameo to cameo, you know, from Cersei Lannister to Jon Snow to what have you, you know, whatever actors they could get their hands on to do the voices and, you know, get the likenesses. It's like, if we're living for that alone, it kind of makes the game a bit of an empty experience. So you don't want it to be that way. And I think that I am at the point where I at least remember pretty much everybody's names, and I generally care about everybody, and I really, really like Beshka. Really, really digging her character and the developments that occur later on in the episode. But yeah, so then meanwhile, we go back to Ironrath with Roderick, who has been quite downtrodden in episodes past. And I was getting real sick of things. Sick of him getting freaking boot in the face, and, you know, just at every single angle, this guy is getting knocked down. So we are very much determined to bring him out on top while at the same time being strategic in dealing with the White Hills. So we see that he's like practicing fighting with Sir Royland in the woods while Talia watches, and then Elena of all people shows up, you know, the unrequited love, whose hand we did not successfully achieve in marriage, which I'm still very bitter about, but things seem to have come back around in this episode in that regard, because we discover, and she's also with Quiver, or her brother Arthur, we find out that she's essentially been promised to Griff Whitehill, and she is not going down without a fight, and in fact would rather have him dead before he gets a ring on her finger. So she comes to the man whom she turned down for what she expresses are political reasons, but she very much comes in this sort of passion, in this place of like, we're taking this guy down together. And we played up that moment something fierce. We got true love's kiss out of that encounter in the woods. So thank you very much, Elena, for making us work for it. That was all fine and well. And so at that point when we had Roderick kiss Elena, and we paused the game and we're just like, yeah, I think we won the game, right? You know, that's the way that all these things end. But not so much. Yeah, it was a very sweet and tender moment. Again, we're trying to take these things as they come, for we know that something shall come to bite us in the ass later on. At any rate, so we go back to King's Landing, where Mira still is. And according to Tom, Lud Whitehill is up to something sinister, and you end up going back to Castle Black, where Cotter ultimately arrives to help Garrett after he is kind of, you know, wandering around trying to find something in his cell that he can use to escape. Because his fate has pretty much been sealed. His fate has pretty much been sealed. How about we try that one? But yeah, so Cotter arrives, and then even Finn ends up coming along. We did, in fact, invite him. So we've got the 3 freaking musketeers, you know. It's a little bit of adventure time, you know, like, adventure time, come on, grab your friends with Finn and Garrett. Yeah, basically that's what we wanted. We wanted to have adventure time, so we're just like, everybody come on, let's go. Let's explore the world together and abandon our post, forsake our vows, and go forth boldly to where no man has gone before. So that's what we decided to go do, that is. So meanwhile, we go back to Roderick. We find out that the Maester is in trouble, and it is at this point in time, of course, that Griff goes down, because I forgot to mention earlier, of course, that Elena shows up with a bunch of armed men who we ended up bringing along as a great show of force, and at that point seized Griff's men. And we delivered precisely 2 delicious punches to his face and sent him to prison. So while we didn't make good on Elena's desire to actually have him killed, we realized that we could leverage him in his imprisoned state for a potential trade for Ryan, who is being held by the White Hills. So in that sense, we were trying to be pragmatic, appease the Lady Love by preventing her from this marriage arrangement, and then also potentially get Ironwrath back up on its own feet, or roots, shall we say, if we're talking about Ironwood. But yeah, so that goes down. I'm so freaking done with Griff. I super wanted to kill him. There's a time and a place for everything under the sun, so we'll see what comes from that. In the meantime, we go back to see Asher. And Beshka is in a drunken rage beating up on Croft, and ultimately through this experience reveals that she had been a slave in the fighting pits in Marine. And so again, this is the beginning of the backstory that ties into her present when we do in fact go into Marine and have to make the decision between obeying the Khaleesi through Croft and letting everything be done Danny's way as far as liberating the people and empowering them to take down their masters? Or, you know, do we go with Beshka, who in fact is the one who is qualified to enact revenge upon her master? And I will jump ahead to later in the episode and say that we did actually let Beshka go through with the killing. Croft still ends up having to work with us anyway, so like the preview that we got for the upcoming episode seems to indicate that Danny is displeased about the way that things went down, but I think there's gotta be an opportunity, I feel, for Beshka to explain her story and to be like, you know, you and I are on the same page in this. I was a slave. I did what I had the right to do and what you were giving me the right to do. So that's kind of what we were banking on. It's like we chose Beshka back in the fight against the dragon and the guys that pursued us into the cave, and so it's just like we've chosen her already, and we feel that we want to keep choosing her wherever possible. She has been an incredible asset, and while she is just one person, and we know how easily even one significant person can be taken down in the Game of Thrones world, we're still banking on this woman. She's got a lot of fight in her. She knows what she's doing, and there is a bond of trust that she shares with Asher, which I'm really banking on. So anyways, I had to say that because it was such a huge moment in the episode, you know, like going directly against the orders of the Khaleesi that are being carried out through Croft, or allowing your friend to enact her justice, get her vengeance that she very much deserves for the torture that she endured in her past. And yeah, it's like, it's those moments that seem so huge and so cataclysmic, and actually we accidentally like made the wrong choice the first time and we went back right away and chose to let Beshka go through with it. We wanted to see what would happen if Asher himself just stepped up and killed the master. Pretty much everybody's upset, so yeah, don't you see in that case. But anyways, so we go back to King's Landing, which is quite, I enjoy King's Landing. It's just such a funny, interesting place. That's definitely where the political intrigue is at its finest. It is that way in the show. It is also that way in the game. And I'm very much scared for Mira, because we really had her grow some balls in this episode, and there were some people that were not going to have that. But basically, here's what's going down. Sarah ends up getting you into the, I believe the coronation reception, which you were not supposed to go to because Marjorie's mad at you, but you do. Because you're trying to figure out what's going on with the White Hills and what you can do to intervene on behalf of your family. So she gets you into the event, and you meet Garibald Tarwick, who is hitting quite a bit on your young friend, which is a little bit uncomfortable, but the guy's not completely unsavory. So yeah, again, you're trying to figure out what's going down with Lord Whitehill, and you discover that Andros is the liaison who is helping Whitehill. And then you end up talking with Ricard, I forget how you pronounce it, but he was the guy who you actually encountered at the Purple Wedding initially, and then things hit the fan with Tyrion, and everybody scattered. So that was that before. So now you speak with Ricard, and you discover that, of course, Andros is working with Lyman Lannister, and then you can go talk to Lyman, who, after, you know, discovering the truth about his addiction to milk of the poppy, and are able, what we did was we had Mira tell Lyman that she knows everything and that Andros is betraying him, and ultimately you're trying to demobilize the military movement that Whitehill is trying to get going on. And it's interesting that you get to use Mira as sort of a vessel for that, and as to how effective what she's doing is going to be, we'll see. because we have a little bit of Cersei Lannister on the horizon, which is inevitably, I'm like swallowing my words as I say them, inevitably going to cause some trouble. Let's leave it at that. But yeah, that was a really fun scene, because you can do some awkward stuff in King's Landing. That is for sure. Like, just supreme awkwardness at every angle, and I love it. Also, we lied to a Tarwick guy. I was calling him Tarmac, but whatever. Lied to him about Sarah. He's very much interested in pursuing her. And we're like, oh yeah, I can vouch for the family, when in fact she's a bastard, but don't tell nobody. So I hope that that bomb doesn't blow up in our face. But we're trying to keep the friendship with Sarah, because again, you gotta keep your strategy mind in the game. So at any rate, we go back to the north. Garrett and friends run into some wildling ladies, and then switch right on back to things with Roderick. So word comes from High Point that Whitehill wants to negotiate some kind of truce. And this is the situation in which we can make the trade of Griff for Ryan, potentially at that point. So what we ended up deciding, now we don't know who the traitor in the court is, but I remember Gwyn actually came to Roderick and said, hey yo, there's a spy in your midst. We ended up having Royland and the Sentinels come with for the trip to High Point. And we still don't know whether Duncan or Royland is the betrayer, but I feel like it's got to be one of those two. We're trying to explore every possible angle, and that's kind of the most logical thing. So it's like going with Royland, of course, is a little bit scary, and like that was actually a really tough choice to make, surprisingly difficult, because like you have to, number one, try to guess like who is your betrayer, and is it going to be worse to have the betrayer by your side or back looking over Ironwrath, you know? So that was the trick. And then of course, like, is bringing this kind of militant presence with you to the meeting with Whitehill, who is supposedly wanting a form of truce. Is that just gonna piss the guy off, or is that gonna be, you know, your insurance against another Red Wedding style event, you know? So yeah. Because social gatherings these days are very much a cause of great anxiety for all involved, not knowing who's going to pull what. So we took Royland and the guards, and we're going to see what the fallout of that is going to be in the next episode. But, yeah, so then I kind of already talked about what happened in Marine, so I'm not going to go over that too much. But ultimately, Asher and Beshka prove very instrumental in immobilizing Dany's enemies, and really what the big outcome for next time that we will see is whether or not you're going to get your hands on some of those second sons for your own purposes. Whether Dany's going to be too pissed at you for what occurred, we'll see. We'll see what's going to fly. But yeah, so ultimately, oh, and also back in the north with Garrett and company, the Three Musketeers, Cotter finds Sylvie, his sister, who may very well be able to take them to the Grove, and there is a little inkling from the future episode that the Grove is not what they think it might be, so we'll see what's going on there. Anytime, so the climax of this episode occurs at High Point. We see that Gwen is upset by the show of force with the Glenmore soldiers, and yeah, ultimately you are brought into the Whitehill's presence, initially just locked in the room by yourself, and you have to kind of preemptively strategize, like, how are we going to respond if there is an attack? Getting ready to hold the line. So as it turns out, when Whitehill shows up and gets this show on the road, he wants you guys to get the ironwood to the Boltons. And now we played Roderick pretty fierce at this particular point in the game. And so we had Roderick try to push for an alliance so as to kind of get you out from under the Whitehill's thumb, which very promptly does Lord Whitehill decline. But that is when you drop the bomb that his son is in prison, and then cue a lot of potential drama. And we were actually able to successfully beg for mercy from Lord Whitehill when he became very pissed at the turn of events, and that this subterfuge has been going on. Yeah, we begged for mercy, and he gave it to us. So the son for son trade is due to go down, but of course Ramsay is back at Iron Wrap. So, oh, just delightful. Just, I do firmly believe that Ramsay Snow is like the most villainous character in the Game of Thrones universe, or at least like the most absolutely despicable in every possible way. So, he is there doing something. And this was not something that was accounted for originally, but I am still very shocked that we managed to get out of High Point relatively unscathed. And now the question also in my mind is Roderick going to possibly have an opportunity of marriage with Elena or with Gwyn? And what's going to happen with the Boltons, of course, since the deal is off? And now the Whitehills and the Forresters' fates are kind of tied in that they'll both likely be screwed over by this. Who freaking cares? I'm done with being stuck under the man's foot. It is time to fight back, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah. Lots of fun shenanigans. I think that covers just about everything from my playthrough. Thank you so much for watching my review. It is such a pleasure to break down this stuff with you guys. Can't wait for the next episode. Really hoping for more of Telltale's The Wolf Among Us. That would be amazing. Yeah. So stick around for my other reviews on the channel. And if there's anything I forgot in this episode, any, things that went really different for you guys, I'd love for you to let me know. And as always, I will be back before you know it.